So my name is Brock Smith. I'm originally from northern Utah, kind of Weber and Box Elder County areas. Yeah, so went to school at Box Elder High, kind of grew up in that northern area. Eventually moved down to Salt Lake. I'm a person in long-term recovery, so I moved down to Salt Lake to pursue treatment and start a new life. Currently, I'm a graduate student at the University of Utah, and I'm studying social work. I am an interning clinician in alpha counseling where I work with justice-involved individuals that struggle with mental health stuff, violent offenses, things of that nature. And I am a co-founder of a local nonprofit called FourLifers Inc that serves people with substance use disorder. In my free time, I like to exercise and hang out with the people that I care about. When I was young, I was raised in a pretty normal family at first. I had two pretty young parents, and when I was 3 years old, they got a divorce just because they couldn't see eye to eye. And my mother also struggled with some mental health challenges. And early on, that would lead us to struggling financially. My dad lived in another state and he supported us, but my mother's mental health challenges really impacted her ability to maintain employment she had 3 kids. There was a lot going on. The struggle was tremendous. And so, during that time, there was also, we struggled with like housing instability, food, and different things like that, which set me up for some challenges later on. And when I was 12 years old, I was arrested with my family for shoplifting school clothes. And this was quite a bit of school clothes that my mom felt that we needed. And, there was a lot of pressure being a single parent family in Utah to make their children very presentable. And so I was arrested with my mother and my older sister, and I would be taken to a Roy Detention Center where that would be my first introduction to the criminal justice system. I was unaware of what was happening until that very moment that we were arrested and taken into that back room, and the world kind of stops at that moment. And the reality of my living situation and my life drastically turned. I was taken to this detention center with my sister, and I remember being very doubtful of what was going to happen. I was afraid, very anxious. And I remember walking down this hallway it's a corridor, and it has cells on each side, and I remember walking down to get my mattress with one of the COs, and I remember looking in each window where individuals with face tats and much older than me are looking down at me, right? And they're all yelling and stuff. And I remember thinking at that moment, I could no longer be the person that I was, because I was going to have to stand up for myself and really shift into no longer being this 12-year-old kid. We were celled 4 people to a 2-man cell, right? So it was very crowded, and I would stay there for a few weeks and deal with the challenges of going to court virtually and meeting individuals that were from gangs and different things like that, and really just being kind of baptism by fire, exposure to the criminal justice system. I hadn't been in trouble in that time before, and so it was a lot. And then when I left there, my mom then was dealing with the criminal record, trying to take care of us. She was on work release and just really battling to take care of her kids. She was already struggling with different things, but then when you have the added barrier of the criminal record, that really limits her potential for earning an opportunity. And so before, where she might have had an administration job, she was now working in these really tough environments that at that time, many years ago, were like, pro hiring individuals with criminal records, but wouldn't pay them much. And it was really a struggle. And this was in the early 2000s. And, she would have to work a whole lot more to make a whole lot less in environments that didn't support her as an employee, and would lead us to more of those challenges that I mentioned previously with just housing instability, food and different things like that. And it prevented her from, having certain benefits like healthcare and different things, because these employers just didn't offer that. During that time, there was a lot of these employers that, would hire people for the day, right? And that really limits what you can do for yourself and for your family, let alone taking care of 3 kids. Even if, there is some outside support there, it's still really hard. And to add to that, it's like the mental health challenge of, I have this existing condition and now this added pressure from society, from my work environment. It's really challenging. During that time, my father started a custody battle, and that would further complicate things, right? And I remember just feeling depressed at that time, depressed, and like I had this big secret that I had to hold. I couldn't tell my friends because I didn't want them thinking I was a thief, or for my peers to think less of me. I mean, I'm 12, 13 at that time. I turned 13 in detention, so I'm 13 at that time. I'm battling with mental illness. My mom's doing her best to be around. My father's trying to, remove us, and he had his place for that. And I remember just thinking that, my life is just chaotic, right? And I would soon start rebelling some more, because then I started to take on that title of, like, if I'm this criminal or if I'm this problem, then I might as well be a problem. I mean, at 13, I don't really know. And, I eventually come across some other individuals that are using substances and from similar backgrounds as me. And I find a bunch of prescription medication. I end up overdosing at 14. And that would teach me this important lesson that would really plague me for the rest of my life, was that I can take substances and no longer feel the things that I feel. And so that would set me up for future arrests related to substances, all the way up until I was 24 years old. And so from about 12 to 24, I was involved in the justice system periodically. In 2018, I was arrested, and I'd go through the system, and that was the first time I was introduced to treatment. I was released to treatment, and I didn't take it very serious. And when I was released from inpatient treatment, I went back home to Ogden, and we were being evicted from our home because of the same challenge that I had previously mentioned. And so instead of moving into a stable environment, I moved back to my home, and we became homeless. My mom, my sister, and all that. And that was another really big challenge, right? And so I didn't stay sober for long, and we were trying to live out of hotels and stuff, and I just decided to go my own way and do the things that I was used to doing, the criminal activity and stuff, because that was my comfort zone, and I think that was also a way for me to control my environment, right? To control myself and my environment by doing these things, because if I do A, then I can get B, and then I can do C. And it's really simple. Even though it's really complex, that's a way for me to control what's going on around me, because everything else is really chaotic. And so through that, I had learned that, I can have some choice. And so I returned back to that lifestyle away from my family. I was homeless and doing the whole criminal activity thing, and eventually, I don't show up to probation, and they put a warrant out for my arrest, and I get arrested again. And at that point, I'm tired. It's the winter in Utah. It's freezing. It's cold. I'm living out of a car, different places, and I was just done. And so I get pulled over, and I get arrested, and I tell the officer, look, I have warrants. I don't have a license. I have drugs on me. Because I knew what was going to happen anyway. They're going to search me and go through the whole motions, and so I was trying to get in front of it. And so I get taken to the same jail that I was in previously, into the same cell, into the same bunk. And so we have this situation where it's like complete return back to where I was, right? And at that time, I am exhausted. I've already lost some friends to overdose and suicide, and I know the trajectory of what's happening in my life. I'm going to end up back in jail or in prison. I'm going to end up dead, or I'm going to end up homeless again. And so at that time, I make that conscious decision to, look to my higher power and, ask for some guidance, as well as ask the judge who had released me previously to treatment to give me another opportunity, right? And, Judge Hamilton released me to treatment, and I took advantage of that opportunity, and things changed. And that's when I moved down to Salt Lake and really began to change my life. And so that same night that I was arrested and sent to the same jail, to the same cell, all that, I was driving with my friend, and I was homeless at this time, and we were driving back to Ogden where he was going to drop me off. And while driving, he became unresponsive. And I remember leaning my head against the window, and we were passing through Willard, and I was trying to get some sleep, or at least close my eyes and just get a moment of respite from everything that was going on. And he started to swerve, and he was talking to me, and he stopped talking and started to swerve back and forth. And so I remember looking up and looking at him, and he had gone pale and kind of slumped, and we're driving in the car at this point, and he's kind of responsive, but he's to that point where it's like, we're in danger. We're in danger, we're in a moving vehicle, plus, I don't know what's going on with my friend, I can imagine. And so we managed to pull off in a parking lot in Smith & Edwards. I don't know, it's a surplus store up north. Anyway, and I see him overdose. I see him become completely unresponsive. His lips are blue, his skin's completely white. He has struggled breathing, and I remember thinking, what am I going to do to save my friend? And also, like, this is my life, right? This reality of these are the decisions and the lifestyle that I'm living, and a part of me, this could have been me, right? So a part of me is also dying. This is my good friend. And it just so happened that I got a phone call from his mother that I don't know how she got my phone number. So this is one of those strange moments where my phone just rings, and for whatever reason, I answer it. And she asks where we're at. And I know her voice because I just talked to her a few hours ago. And I tell her where we're at, and that I can't move my friend because I'm emaciated, right? I'm 140 pounds maybe. My friend's bigger than me. I can't move him out of the driver's seat and get him back into the vehicle. And she just happened to be in the area, and so she came, and we moved him into the vehicle, and then we went to the hospital. She dropped me off in Ogden, and they went to the hospital. And that friend would later overdose and die from drug addiction, so we made it through that night. But when I got dropped back off in Ogden, I had went and picked up another vehicle, and that's when I got arrested. And so that aha moment that I had really was like the sum of like this night, also being on the run and being homeless, and just being done, just being completely done with the experience, knowing that I had previous opportunity that I had kind of threw away because of drugs, addiction, and trauma. And I wanted to see if I could regain some of those opportunities.
Sounds really hard.
Yeah, it was challenging, And I think it provided me with a lot of the motivation and understanding that I use today to help others. Man, I remember sitting in that courtroom and just being like, Judge Hamilton, please. Like, I know you have no reason to believe me based on what I did. And if you just give me this one opportunity, I want to leave the place that I was living. I want to relocate. I have this treatment lined up. Just please let me. And he did. And I went to inpatient, and I remember being an inpatient, and there was a complete mental shift. Before, when I was in inpatient, I still carried a lot of the walls that I had previously that had served me in my environment. A lot of the ego and a lot of just, this false belief to provide myself with some sense of confidence. And so I didn't go into treatment like that. I went in treatment very humble, and I remember mopping the floor the first night that I was there, and I was just super glad. It was around Christmas, and so I was in treatment for Christmas, and I remember just mopping this floor and just recognizing myself that my psyche had shifted to just being grateful, because I was ready for this opportunity, and I didn't care what had happened. I didn't care what was going on. This was my opportunity to change, and I was going to take it. And so I went through the whole treatment circuit. So I went to inpatient, to outpatient, to sober living, and those are some of the supports, the more formal supports that helped me get through the treatment process, and also just being able to work on a lot of my traumas and to change my perspective. And then while I was in treatment, I got connected to a really awesome support network of individuals who wanted to not only support our group, but to start supporting others. And that's how we formed FourLifers Incorporated as this informal support network that delivers specific services to individuals, like recreation events, individual mentoring, like group recovery meetings, as well as community outreach events. And so in addition to the formal supports, I had these informal supports that helped me and that I helped make this whole system of support for individuals like us. And so I had like both sides of it. And together with that, I mustered up the courage to return to school because I had dropped out in 2013 because of drug addiction and suicide of someone close to me, right? And so I returned to school, and I think school also supported me in that, as far as giving me opportunity in addition to support. So support plus opportunity got me to where I am today.
Where does the name FourLifers come from?
I believe it comes from the idea of like for community, for support, for recovery, and I didn't create the name, but I do believe that was my understanding of what the person was wanting it to be. So it's kind of a play on the, on the number 4, F-O-U-R, like 4 pillars of support and recovery, for change, for life. And so the school journey, my record, I was still involved with the criminal justice system when I went back to school. I was still on probation. And so one of the first notable things that I remember is going to class and having this doubt. And I remember one day in the fall, I had a probation meeting right after class, and I had missed the bus. And I remember trying to text my probation officer saying, hey, I'm going to be a few minutes late, and I was still multiple blocks away from where I needed to be. And he said, if you're not here by this time, I'm taking you to jail. And so I remember running with my backpack down State Street from the Salt Lake City campus to get to this office. And I remember just running because I'm like, I've been doing so well. I haven't violated, haven't committed any other violations or anything like that. No drug use, and I'm going to get taken back to jail because I missed the bus after class. I remember thinking, this just sucks. But I made it, and I had that conversation with him, and I think over time he began to understand how serious I was, and like my education was important to me, and I was going to do everything I could in the future to make sure that I was here on time. But having that, just that honest conversation with him about like, this is important to me, and this is going to help me long after our time is over, so please support me in this. And he was really supportive. And so that was like the first challenge, right? And didn't really have any housing challenges because I was still within the sober living, kind of the sober living matrix, if you will. And so I remember going to, so I graduated with high honors at SLIC as the Provost Graduate of Excellence for the social sciences for my work in social work and my work in the community. And so had that really great opportunity of getting that award and deciding I was going to go to the University of Utah to pursue social work because of this focus on mental health, substance use disorder treatment, as well as like community building and programming, different things like that. And I remember applying to the University of Utah, and there's a part where they ask you about a criminal record, right? I have this record. And so I had to go through the process of submitting documentations and kind of justifying my position of why I wanted to go to their school to pay them to serve our community, right? Which is kind of backwards. And so I did that because it was important to me. And I don't know if it was more of a reminder. It was more of a reminder than a barrier of like, hey, moving forward, even though you've done all this great work, you're still going to have this thing. And although you made it past this checkpoint, what's the next checkpoint? What's the checkpoint after that? And is this always going to be a thing? And will I always no matter how good of the work that I do, will I always have to stand up and tell people that I have done A, B, C, D, and E just to get past, right? Even though I would do those things regardless, it's kind of like I have to make my own case, you know?
And continue to prove yourself.
And continue to prove myself again and again and again. And, you know, I was blessed to have the opportunity to do all these positive things that supported that case, right? That supported me proving myself. And a lot of people may not have those same opportunities. And the next barrier was going to graduate school. I received plenty of awards during my bachelor's year, faculty awards and different things like that. And even after that, even after they had, you know, approved of me, I still had to go and prove myself again to them, which is hard. I ran into another challenge when I was asked about my criminal record for my grad school application. And I had a lot of fear with that and a lot of mental strain. The fear came from the fact that I had already done all these wonderful things and they had already accepted me into higher education. And now I had to justify my position again. And the fear came from the possibility that I would have an application reviewer on a bad day, or maybe they didn't like my story and they would reject me, and that would end my higher education goal, right, my pursuit. And so even though I know that I had a lot of supporting documentation and I'd done all these wonderful things, the fear is there and the doubt comes up because what am I going to do if this doesn't go through, right? Like I can't achieve my goal. I'll never be able to achieve my goal of reaching this academic level because of my background. And I was lucky enough to be accepted. And the next challenges came in the form of getting placement. So as a SUDSI or an MSW, you get placed at different practicums or internships. And you're placed at these, and one of the things that come up is like being cleared by DOPL for being able to practice, basically. And so then you have to then justify yourself again to DOPL, even to just be approved temporarily. And after going through all this work to landing your placement, you have the doubt of, am I going to be able to remain here and do the things that I've worked so hard for the last few years to do because of my criminal record, you know? And so there's a lot of fear, doubt, strain, and uncertainty. Like, when is the next thing gonna come up? Or this overall fear of like, are they gonna find something that they already don't know, of like, even though the record is clear of what happened, like, are they somehow going to find that I'm guilty of something else? And so, like, there's this overall narrative of, like, I'm guilty, and they're going to find out. Even though everything has been completely transparent, you still have this fear when you haven't done anything outside of what they know you've done. Record expungement is so much more accessible now than it was, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, for sure. And so, for me, that is part of a long-term goal because it provides me with opportunity to get into doors that I otherwise wouldn't be able to, or would have to justify myself left and right just to be accepted in the room. Even if I am one of the most qualified individuals to be in that room, I still have to justify myself. And so being able to have my record expunged allows me to finally put all that stuff behind me. And I think record expungement also allows me to show up the way that I want to show up and the way that I am now compared to the way that I was many years ago, right? I don't break the law anymore. I do all this positive stuff because I want to, and I'm this productive member of society, and I want to be seen that way. And so being able to have my record expunged allows me to do that, and allows me to not have that fear and that guilt and that wonder of when this is all gonna break and I'm gonna come tumbling down. So I've had some of my records expunged. There is certain time frames on certain charges that will take a little bit longer, but I've had a lot of it expunged, and even the things that I've had expunged have just made me feel that much better, right? It's one less thing that I have to justify to all these individuals and all these state agencies or my employers of like, hey, I have this thing. Even just the reduction of like a few of those things makes me feel 10 times better. And so being able to have them all gone, I'm kind of just waiting in anticipation because it's just going to be a wonderful feeling. It's going to be completely freeing, and I'm excited for that day to come. I think these campaigns are important to demonstrate that the justice system is complex and people's lives are complex, and it's not always what you think. A criminal record or a person with a criminal record is not always the stereotypical image that we may have in our mind. People's lives are complex. There's a lot of social conditions and different things that lead people to believe that committing a crime is in their best interest. And I believe these campaigns are important because they give people opportunity, right? If I have already served my time in the criminal justice system and paid my fines and been through this complex and lengthy process, then I should be able to walk away and receive the same opportunities that anybody else receives, right? Because I paid my debt. I mean, I shouldn't have to walk around with the scarlet letter, right, of people always knowing that I made a mistake this many years ago, right, and it preventing me from contributing more to society or contributing more for my family or for myself. And so these campaigns are important because they give people freedom and opportunity. And also I think it weighs out, it's like a check and balance for the justice system for me, right? If you get convicted, you serve your time, you do the process, it should be done. And so this campaign works towards that, like that restorative justice piece, which I think is important. My plan for the rest of my life is going to be exciting, right? I can only speculate at this time because I want to do a lot over the course of my lifetime. But currently, I'm looking at furthering my education after graduate school. I want to get a doctoral level degree. I'm thinking about law right now, so I've been studying to apply for that process. Long term, I want to open a sober living company that serves people with substance use disorder in the Salt Lake area. I will probably grow my nonprofit to increase the amount of individuals that we can serve and the services that we can provide to individuals. I will probably open up a clinic that serves people with substance use disorder or practice law in some way revolving criminal justice or policy. And I hope one day to get old and retire on a beach somewhere and chill, and be able,
I love that.
and be able to look back and know that I went through this process and I was able to, pass the torch and help others get through the same process, make it easier for them, and make an impact. I want to leave this world better than how I found it, even though it sounds cliche. I think a lot of social workers and different people of that want to do that same thing.
How do you hope at the end of your life people describe you when they say, Brock is or Brock was? What follows?
I think Brock was brave enough to stand up for his values and help others achieve a quality life that they didn't have previously. Brock was a person who cared and would take the time to help anybody that he could. Brock was from a challenging environment, and Brock went on to make something of himself and help others do the same. Yeah, so there is a lot of individuals that I would consider mentors or guides. First, I would say my parents, for always caring and showing up for me, and always reinforcing the idea that I could be something regardless of our situations, teaching me integrity and compassion and caring for other individuals and serving marginalized groups. I would also say some of my friends, Matt Goff, business owner, for teaching me to care for people regardless of where you're at in life and to continue to do your best regardless. People like Amy Dashiell, Destiny Garcia, people that had previous criminal records that went on to made something impactful for themselves and for other individuals. Clinicians like Mace Warren, Jeff Moore, for showing up for people that were justice involved and not forgetting them just because of their situations. Professors like Dr. Nocella, who works a lot in the community and for justice-involved individuals, Dr. Castillo, Dr. Ned, Professor Tony Michelle. There's a lot of those, and then you, Noella Sudbury, for not forgetting people like us and trying to make a benefit, for showing up in a way that allows me to show up for myself and others. September is Recovery Month, and recovery is a complex thing, right? I think it's unique for each individual, and for me, it really means freedom. Freedom from the worst parts of ourselves that wanted to hurt ourselves, freedom from the chains of addiction, freedom to reinvent myself, freedom and permission to grow in ways that I didn't know before, freedom to have a peaceful life, and freedom to prioritize service and getting outside of yourself to contribute to the overall well of people, right? So recovery, for me, means knowing the environment and the situation that I came from and these strains and challenges that I came from to making a better life for myself and for the world, right? Yeah, and so this month, I'm thinking about, wow, how many people have successfully recovered and gone on to help other people, and how it's grown over the past few years, at least from my perspective, and how the whole recovery industry has continued to grow as far as not only treatment, but recovery community organizations that are showing up to serve people in different ways. I just think recovery is growing. It's a beautiful thing to see because of what it gave to me. Yeah, so I am a tribal member of the Onida Indian Nation of Wisconsin, and I come from a long line of individuals that served other individuals as well. And so my grandfather came out to Utah to go to the Intermountain schools in Brigham City and went on to get his education and to serve the Native population. My father went on to, and my uncles went on to get their education and serve the Native populations. And so for me, being a Native person provides me with a sense of honor, a sense of community, a sense of service, and also just this desire to be my best self because I'm aware of what our people struggle with, and how important it is to be a role model, and how important it is to help others that are struggling, right? Both my parents are still in my life. My family has went through their whole recovery experience as well. So all my family is much healthier than when we were growing up. Really involved with both of my parents. Yeah.
And your siblings, are they here?
Yeah, my siblings are good. Everybody's good. Everybody's going to school. So trying to support that and be a good role model for them as well. Yeah, I believe that my recovery journey had a positive impact on my family's healing journey because I was one of the ones that suffered the most. And although we all suffered, through my dedication to recovery and believing in myself and pursuing treatment, I believe that opened up my family members' perspective to what was possible and what could be achieved. And I believe I led the path in that, and through their own motivation and through their own actions, they pursued their own forms of recovery and eventually came from a situation like I came from to living successful and lives that are meaningful. I was one of those individuals that struggled with some comorbidity, or the challenges of having both substance use disorder and mental health challenges. And for me, it's very complex because they feed off one another, right? They have like this cyclical nature. And my mental health challenges of like depression and anxiety definitely led to my addiction in the first place. And so that influenced my addiction, and then once my addiction took over, that became the primary presenting problem, but all along this underlying depression, trauma, all that kind of stuff was never able to be worked on or focused on really until I handled the addiction. And so the mental health challenges, I think, were the primary factor of me developing addiction, and I think those things kept me sick. It was kind of like the hands behind the curtain, really, for my addiction and a lot of my behaviors. And even after recovering from substance use disorder, that really allowed me to begin to work on my mental health challenges, the depression, the anxiety, the trauma, different things like that. And that has been more of a long-term process, right? I think that although I have recovered from those things, I think that they're much more pervasive in a person's life that's struggling with addiction, because addiction is just like the immediate solution to those problems. What advice would I give someone who is still cycling through the criminal justice system or who is still struggling with addiction? Don't give up. Find a focal point or a goal that you want to pursue that is meaningful to you and that is healthy, and go after it. If you're already struggling with addiction and in the criminal justice system, you know what that life's going to bring, right? So at least try to do something else. It was through trying to do something else and submitting to that process that allowed me to get to the point that I was at. I had to get to that point where that entire existence was hopeless, and I knew it very well. And so set a goal, go after it, don't give up, keep trying. If it's something that you want and that can benefit you both now and in the future, then it's worth pursuing. Don't let your insecurities and doubt prevent you from making a life worth living. And don't let the barriers that society may put in your path as a person with an addiction or a person with the criminal justice system prevent you from powering through. If you have been in the criminal justice system or addiction, chances are you've already struggled through some pretty significant things. And so choose your struggle, right? Because it's going to be there regardless. So choose a struggle that's going to pay off.